So we've covered a lot of really wild stuff on this show. We've had airships, phantom trains, impossible climbs, millionaire castles, and those huge conservation victories.
Yeah, the Adirondacks definitely have that sort of rugged, adventurous lore to them.
Right. But today, we're doing a deep dive into something totally different. We're going to talk about one of the most surprising and honestly life-changing chapters in Adirondack history.
Oh, this one is powerful. It's really equal parts tragedy, hope, and just incredible human resilience.
Yeah, it really is. Because our mission today is to look at the Saranac Lake cure. We're going to explore how this tiny, isolated mountain town unexpectedly became like the world's capital for treating tuberculosis.
Which is such a massive pivot in medical history, you know? Like, you have this incredibly harsh physical environment, and instead of just using it for recreation, they figured out how to use it as an actual biological tool.
Exactly. And for you listening, I want you to imagine getting a terminal medical diagnosis, right?
Okay.
Like your lungs are quite literally dissolving inside your chest.
Ugh, yeah, terrifying thought.
And the doctors, well, they have no pills to offer you, no surgical interventions, just no real hope at all.
Nothing in the medical bag that could actually fix it back then.
Right. And your physician's only prescription is to pack your bags, leave everything you know behind, move into the freezing wilderness of upstate New York, and basically sit completely still on a porch in the middle of a blizzard.
I mean, it sounds way less like a medical treatment and more like some sort of brutal endurance test.
It really does. But for millions of people, that grueling prescription was literally the only thing standing between them and a terrible fate.
It was their absolute last hope.
So to understand why anyone would willingly subject themselves to freezing on a mountain, we kind of have to start with the sheer terror of the disease itself. Because in the late 1800s, tuberculosis was a death sentence for millions.
Oh, absolutely. It was a global plague. And, you know, they famously called it consumption.
Right, which sounds like this dramatic Victorian-era word, but
But it wasn't just poetic. It was a biologically accurate description of what was happening. Tuberculosis is caused by this mycobacterium, and when it infiltrates the lungs, it essentially begins eating the lung tissue.
just literally destroying it.
Yeah, creating these physical cavities. So your immune system recognizes the invasion and just goes into a state of total hyperdrive to fight it off.
And that immune response, that's where the horror really sets in, right?
Precisely. Because the body's defensive response causes this chronic, unrelenting fever, and that constant high temperature just burns through all the patient's caloric reserves.
Yeah.
And since the bacteria is destroying the lungs, your oxygen intake drops, and the body actually starts cannibalizing its own fat and muscle just to keep the vital organs functioning.
So from the outside, you're watching a person just literally waste away.
Exactly. They are being consumed from the inside out by their own metabolism.
That is just biologically terrifying. If you got that diagnosis, I mean, the standard advice was basically go home, get your affairs in order, and try to be comfortable while you fade away.
Because there was no cure. Which brings us to Dr. Edward Livingston Trudeau.
Right, so here's a medical professional who suddenly finds himself on the wrong side of the stethoscope. He contracts tuberculosis himself.
And for a doctor in the late 19th century, that diagnosis carries this unique psychological weight. You know exactly what the mechanical progression of the disease looks like.
Yeah, you've watched patients die from it.
Exactly. You know exactly how powerless you are to stop it.
So, he makes a really radical decision. He theorizes that the cold, clean mountain air of the Adirondacks could somehow help.
He basically risks his remaining time on an unproven theory.
Yeah, so in 1885, he heads up to Saranac Lake and builds the very first sanatorium there. And when I look at this, it feels like an early, desperate version of biohacking.
Oh, I like that term for it.
Because, you know, they didn't have pharmaceuticals to stop the bacteria internally. So he's trying to use a freezing environment as like an external pause button on his body's metabolism.
That biohacking analogy is spot on. I mean, think about the broader context of the Industrial Revolution then. Cities were just choked with coal smog, overcrowded, deeply unsanitary.
Just terrible air quality.
Right. The average urban dweller's lungs were already under constant assault. So Trudeau is proposing this massive paradigm shift, removing a patient from a toxic environment and using extreme climate as an active medical intervention.
But wait, hold on. I really need to push back on the mechanics of this.
Okay, sure.
Because I understand getting out of the smog. Clean air makes sense. But the Adirondacks in the winter are brutally, dangerously cold.
Oh, absolutely freezing.
We are talking sub-zero temperatures.
Yeah.
You're taking patients with failing lungs, terrible immune systems, basically zero body fat, and making them sit outside in the snow.
It sounds totally backwards.
Yeah. From a modern perspective, it sounds like a fantastic way to induce hypothermia and just speed up the dying process. How do they justify the freezing temperatures biologically?
Well, it does seem entirely counterintuitive until you look at how cold air actually impacts human physiology.
Okay, explain that.
When you're exposed to freezing temperatures, your body undergoes vasoconstriction. The blood vessels narrow.
Oh, right.
So for a tuberculosis patient whose lungs are inflamed, swollen, and literally bleeding, that cold air acts as an anti-inflammatory.
Wait, really? So it just shrinks the swelling?
Exactly. It constricts the tissue, which reduces the swelling in the respiratory tract and can significantly ease that violent, relentless cough.
Oh, wow. So the cold was essentially this massive, full-body ice pack for inflamed lungs.
Functionally, yes. But the cold air was only half of the equation. The other, arguably more important mechanism of the Saranac Lake cure was absolute mandatory rest.
Right, and when we say rest, we aren't talking about, like, sleeping in late on a Sunday or taking a leisurely stroll.
No, not at all.
The sources outline a regimen that was shockingly rigorous. Word of Trudeau's success spread really fast globally, drawing people from all over the world to Saranac Lake for the cure.
Yeah, the town physically adapted to handle all these people.
They built these things called cure cottages, which were characterized by massive porches.
Those porches were essentially the clinical treatment rooms.
And patients spent hours every single day outside, breathing fresh air, resting, and adhering to strict daily routines, wrapped up in like heavy wool blankets and raccoon coats.
And they were forced to sit completely still.
Which just sounds so grueling. Was sitting completely still on a snowy porch actually healing? Or did the cure feel almost as bad as the disease?
Well, it was tough, but the underlying philosophy was all about energy conservation. When you have a bacteria consuming the body's resources, every single calorie matters.
Even small movements.
Even small movements, walking, talking, even reading a book or getting overly emotional requires metabolic energy.
Wow, so you couldn't even get stressed out.
Nope. By enforcing a rigid routine of profound physical stillness, doctors were attempting to redirect 100% of the patient's biological energy toward the immune system.
It's basically discipline as medicine.
Yes, it is imposing order on biological chaos. Enforcing that routine was one of the only ways doctors could assert control over a totally uncontrollable illness. They couldn't kill the bacteria, but they could meticulously manage the energy output.
But the psychological toll of that must have been just staggering. You are trapped in your own mind, staring out at a snowy mountain, and you aren't even allowed to have a lively conversation because it might raise your heart rate.
The mental fortitude it required was immense, and it naturally created this very strange, tightly knit ecosystem in Saranac Lake.
Right, because you have this town filled with thousands of highly contagious people. How did the local infrastructure not just completely collapse?
That is where the community aspect becomes so remarkable. Saranac Lake evolved into this unique hybrid, part hospital, part village, part last hope.
Yeah, the doctors, the nurses, and even the local families all integrated to manage the crisis. The local families actually took in boarders.
Which is incredible when you think about it.
Everyday people were opening their private homes to house patients suffering from a highly contagious, deadly disease.
It required strict sanitary rules, of course, elaborate protocols for boiling linens, managing spittoons, sterilizing everything.
But beyond the logistics, it required just a profound level of empathy.
Oh, for sure. Instead of isolating themselves or rejecting the sick, the townspeople built an entire economy and a culture of care around them. It was a true community model.
And it wasn't just everyday folks making the journey. Tuberculosis was the great equalizer. The disease brought some very famous faces to the mountains, too.
Yeah, famously the author Robert Louis Stevenson.
Yes, he came to Saranac Lake to take the cure, and he actually wrote part of his classic novel, Treasure Island, while he was there.
The contrast there is absolutely stunning to me.
It's such a surreal juxtaposition. Like, think about the physical reality. He is bundled up in blankets, sitting practically motionless on a freezing mountain porch, facing his own mortality.
Yeah, in the dead of an Adirondack winter.
And yet, in his mind, he is dreaming up sun-drenched tropical islands, pirates, and high-seas adventure.
It really highlights the intense psychological environment of the town. This wasn't just a place of sickness. It was a hub of intense creativity and shared humanity.
It was almost like a high-stakes, involuntary artist's retreat.
That's a great way to put it. The universal vulnerability required by those strict porch-sitting routines naturally erase social boundaries.
Right, because everyone's in the same boat.
Exactly. Whether you were a wealthy industrialist or a local shopkeeper, once you were wrapped in those blankets, your social status just dissolved. You were just a human being trying to draw a clear breath.
United by a single desperate goal. But we should note, while some got better, tragically, some did not, the cure was not foolproof.
No, and the medical professionals there knew extreme rest was only a stopgap measure. But that brings us to the most vital legacy of the town.
Right, because the Saranac Lake cure era actually helped pioneer modern treatments.
The sanatoriums weren't just porches. They were massive clinical observation hubs. They were running a huge scientific operation behind the scenes.
Oh, interesting.
Decades of charting fevers, monitoring weight, taking early x-rays. They provided the medical world with a deeply comprehensive baseline understanding of tuberculosis.
And that longitudinal data was heavily contributed to the research that led to the antibiotics that finally defeated the disease.
Yes. By the 1940s, the scientific community was synthesizing the first true antibiotics, like streptomycin. Saranac Lake was instrumental in the clinical trials that proved those drugs actually worked.
Which is amazing, but it leads to this incredibly bittersweet paradox for the town itself.
It really does.
I mean, they dedicated their entire existence to a cure, and when the magic bullet of antibiotics finally arrived, their entire way of life had to shut down overnight. They effectively researched themselves out of business.
They did.
So how does a town pivot from being the world's hospital back to just a town? Because by the 1950s, the last sanatorium closed.
Well, from an economic standpoint, losing your primary industry is obviously devastating. But from a historical perspective, those closed doors shouldn't be seen as a loss.
Right.
It should be seen as a monument to human progress. It represents one of the greatest yet quietest victories in medical history. The ultimate goal of fighting a plague is obsolescence.
They won the war. And today, the legacy really lives on. You can still visit the Trudeau Institute, the historic cure cottages, the museums, and the patient cemetery.
The physical remnants stand as proof of a plague that was actually conquered. It's lang history.
And for you listening, if you want to experience this incredible history firsthand and you're staying at the Alpine Homestead, Saranac Lake is an easy, beautiful drive away.
Oh, it's a gorgeous drive.
We really invite you to walk the historic streets, visit the museums, and just feel the history of this place of healing.
It's a powerful reminder of how these mountains have been a sanctuary for so many.
It's exactly. This deep dive is brought to you by the Alpine Homestead. If you are visiting the Adirondacks or the surrounding areas, you can book your stay and play at thealpinehomestead.com.
It's the perfect base camp for exploring all this history.
For sure. So we want to turn it over to you. Have you ever visited Saranac Lake? Or do you have any old family stories about the cure era?
So many families have a relative who made that train ride up into the mountains.
Yeah, we'd love for you to reflect on these histories next time you're sitting around a campfire.
And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Saranac Lake proved that sometimes the physical environment itself is the medicine.
Oh, that's a really interesting point.
Right, because in our modern era, we live with these sterile, windowless hospital rooms and heavily synthesized drugs. We rely on pills for everything.
Right, there's a pull for every single ailment.
Exactly. But looking at the profound impact of cold air and deep rest, it makes you wonder, what natural environmental cures are we currently underestimating? Are there modern ailments we are endlessly trying to cure with pills that might be better treated by simply changing the environment we live in and the air we breathe?
That is definitely something to think about.
Hmm?
We'll leave you with that, and we'll see you next time.